The text message came in at 2:47 in the morning, and I almost didn't see it. We were in Sedona for my in-laws' 40th anniversary. My husband's parents had rented out a whole resort, the kind with terracotta floors and infinity pools that blur into the red rock horizons. I'd been lying awake anyway, listening to my husband breathe beside me, thinking about the presentation I had back in Phoenix on Monday. I work in estate law. Specifically, I review contested wills and trust documents for a firm downtown. I spend my days finding the sentences other people missed. The message was from a number I didn't recognize, Arizona area code, but no name. Don't sign anything this weekend. I mean it. Call me when you're alone. I stared at it for a long time. Then I set my phone face down on the nightstand and told myself it was a wrong number. I didn't sleep again until almost 5. My mother-in-law, I'll call her by what she always insisted I call her, which was Mom, though it never felt natural in my mouth, had organized the weekend down to the minute. Saturday morning yoga at 7, brunch at 9, a family meeting at 2 in the afternoon, which she described in the group chat as a chance to discuss the future together as a family. I'd read that message 3 times trying to figure out what it meant. My husband said it was probably just about the lake house. My husband's name is Warren. We've been married 6 years. He's the kind of man who trusts his mother completely, which I used to find endearing. I don't anymore. His sister, Petra, was already at the breakfast table when I came down. Petra is 4 years younger than Warren, unmarried, and has lived in their parents' guest house in Scottsdale for the past 3 years. She smiled at me the way she always does, wide and empty, like a window with nothing behind it. "Sleep okay?" she asked. "Fine," I said. Their father, a retired contractor named Hugh, was sitting at the end of the table reading something on his phone. He didn't look up when I sat down. Hugh has never been unkind to me exactly. He just operates as if I'm slightly out of focus, a guest who keeps forgetting to leave. My mother-in-law came in from the patio holding a mimosa. She kissed Warren on the top of his head, squeezed Petra's shoulder, and set a small gift bag in front of me. "For you," she said. Just a little something. Inside was a candle and a card. The card said, "So glad you're part of this family," in her handwriting. I thanked her and felt, for just a second, like I was being prepared for something. The family meeting started at 2:15. So we sat in the resort's private lounge, 4 of us around a low table, a pitcher of iced water nobody touched. My mother-in-law had a manila folder in front of her. She opened it the way people open folders when they've practiced opening them. "We've been working with our estate attorney," she began, "and we want to make sure everything is set up correctly before anything happens to us." Hugh nodded at the table. "We've restructured the family trust," she continued, "to simplify things. And there's a document we need everyone to sign today, just to formalize the new arrangement." She slid a packet across the table toward me. I looked at it, 12 pages, stapled, at the top, Amendment to the Harwick Family Revocable Living Trust. My name was on page 4. Specifically, there was a clause on page 4 in which I, as a spouse of a trust beneficiary, agreed to relinquish any independent claim to trust assets in the event of Warren's death, separation, or incapacitation, and further agreed that any inheritance I might receive through Warren would be redirected to the surviving blood relatives of the Harwick family. I read it twice. "What exactly is this?" I asked. My mother-in-law smiled. "It's standard. Our attorney recommended it. It just keeps things clean." "Clean," I repeated. "It protects the family assets," Petra said without looking up from her phone, "from outside claims." Outside claims. I had been married to their son for 6 years. I had a hyphenated ins last name that included theirs, but sure. Outside, I set the packet down on the table and folded my hands on top of it. "I'd like to have my own attorney review this before I sign anything," I said. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. Warren looked at the table. Hugh looked at the wall. My mother-in-law's smile didn't move, but something behind her eyes did. "Of course," she said finally. "Take all the time you need." She said it the way people say things they don't mean. I excused myself to use the restroom and sat on the closed lid of the toilet for 4 minutes with my phone in both hands. I pulled up the unknown number from the night before. "Who is this?" I typed. The response came in less than 30 seconds. "My name is Douglas. I used to work for Harwick Construction. I have documents you need to see. Please don't sign anything." My hands were very still. "How did you get my number?" "I've been trying to find a way to contact you for 8 months. You're listed as an estate attorney on the firm's website. I figured you'd understand what I was sending you." "What are you sending me?" "And a copy of the original trust, the one Warren's grandfather set up in 1987. the one his mother amended 6 weeks ago without telling Warren. I sat there in that resort bathroom with the scent of eucalyptus diffuser in the air and the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears, and I thought, I audit other people's family secrets for a living. I never thought to audit my own. I went back to the lounge and told my mother-in-law I had a migraine coming on and needed to rest before dinner. She looked at me for just a second too long. "Of course, sweetheart," she said. Warren came upstairs with me. He sat on the edge of the bed while I stood at the window, looking out at the red rock formations going gold in the afternoon light. "Is this about the document?" he asked. "I just want to review it properly," I said. "I do this for a living, Warren. You know I can't sign something without reading it. It's not complicated. 12 pages is not a simple document." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "She worked really hard on this weekend. I don't want her to feel like we're not, like you don't trust her." I turned around. "Do you know what's in that amendment?" He shrugged, and something about the shrug bothered me more than anything else that had happened that day. "It protects the family. It removes me from any claim to your inheritance. If you die, I get nothing. Everything goes back to your blood relatives." He was quiet. "Warren, did you know that? I knew it was about restructuring. I looked at him. "Baby, I work in estate law. That clause is not restructuring. That clause is specifically designed to cut me out." He stood up and walked to the window beside me and looked out at the rocks. "She loves you," he said. "She gave you a candle." I didn't say anything to that. That night, after Warren fell asleep, I called Douglas. He was 61 years old. He'd worked as a bookkeeper for Harwick Construction for 19 years before my mother-in-law let him go 18 months ago. He had a quiet voice and the careful speech of a man who had been holding on to something heavy for a long time. The original trust, he told me, was set up by Warren's grandfather, Edmund. He built the construction company from nothing. When he died in 2003, he left everything in trust: the business, the real estate holdings, some investment accounts. Total value at that time was about 4.2 million. What's it worth now? Closer to 9, maybe 9.5. I was quiet for a moment. And Warren doesn't know this. Warren has been told the trust is worth approximately 1.8 million. That's what's in the amended documents his mother had prepared. I pressed my fingers against my temple. She's been diverting funds for at least 11 years, based on what I found before she terminated my position. He paused. "Mrs. Harwick, I'm sorry, Mrs. Just call me by my first name," I said. "It's Meg. I need you to understand something." I tried to raise questions internally, and within 3 weeks I was let go. She told the board I'd been accessing files without authorization. I wasn't, but she controls the board. He paused again. "I kept copies of everything. I've been trying to figure out who to send them to for over a year. When I found your name, an estate attorney, married to Warren, I thought you'd be the right person. Why didn't you go to the police?" "I did, 8 months ago. I was told it was a civil matter." He sighed. "These things take time when the family has money and lawyers." "I know," I said. "I know exactly how they take time." After I hung up, I lay in the dark for a long time, listening to Warren breathe. $9.5 million. A document designed to cut me out, presented to me on a weekend trip with a gift bag and a candle and a smile. And my husband, who slept like a child next to me, who had looked me in the eye and said, "She loves you." Did he know? Was he protecting his mother? Or had he been protected from the truth so long he couldn't see the shape of it anymore? I didn't know. And I realized, lying there in the dark in Sedona, that I was going to have to find out. I did not sign the document that weekend. My mother-in-law said nothing about it directly, but I felt the temperature of the trip change. Sunday brunch was quieter. Petra stopped speaking to me entirely, which was almost a relief. Hugh found reasons to be in other rooms. Warren kept giving me these sideways looks that I couldn't quite read. Apology or warning, I wasn't sure which. We drove back to Phoenix on Sunday evening. In the car, Warren said, "Are you going to have someone look at it?" "Yes, how long will that take?" "As long as it takes." He didn't ask again. I spent the next 3 weeks being very careful. At work, I have access to legal databases, historical trust filings, and a network of colleagues who specialize in exactly the kind of financial forensics I now needed to perform on my own family situation. The ethics of using work resources for personal matters gave me pause for approximately 48 hours. Then I thought about a clause on page 4 of a 12-page document designed to make sure that if my husband died, I would leave the marriage with nothing, and the pause ended. Douglas sent me everything he had. scanned records, internal transfer summaries, correspondence between my mother-in-law and a financial advisor named Kessler in Tucson, who had been moving money from the trust into what appeared to be a series of LLCs registered under variations of her maiden name. The original trust document, the one Edmund Harwick had signed in 1987, was 44 pages long. It named Warren and Petra as equal beneficiaries, with a provision that spouses of beneficiaries were entitled to a survivor's share in the event of a beneficiary's death. That provision was standard for the era. It was also the provision that had been removed in the amendment my mother-in-law had prepared 6 weeks before this weekend. She hadn't just been diverting money. She'd found out the amendment she needed to cut me out, and she'd moved to execute it before I could learn what I was being cut out of. I started building a file. I also started paying attention in a different way at home. The small things I'd explained away for years began to rearrange themselves. The way my mother-in-law always called Warren before he could call her, so she knew what we'd talked about before I'd had a chance to process it. The way Petra had always known details of our finances that Warren had never directly shared. Our mortgage rate, a car loan we'd paid off, a bonus I'd received 2 years ago. The way Hugh sometimes looked at me with something that wasn't quite guilt but was adjacent to it. And Warren, my husband. I didn't confront him, not yet. I needed to know how much he knew before I decided what to do with what I knew. I hired a forensic accountant named Gil, someone I'd worked with on 2 contested estate cases, who I trusted completely. I gave him Douglas's records in 3 weeks. He came back to me on a Tuesday morning with a report that was 61 pages long. Over 11 years, approximately $2.3 million had been transferred out of the Harwick family trust through a combination of inflated management fees, undisclosed loans to the LLCs, and direct distributions recorded as administrative expenses. The money had moved to accounts that ultimately benefited 2 people, my mother-in-law personally, and Petra. Warren had received nothing above the standard annual distributions that were documented in the formal trust accounting he was shown each year. He had no idea. Or he had an idea and had chosen not to look at it directly, which is a thing people do when the truth is a shape they can't bear to look at. Gil also found something else. A life insurance policy on Warren, a policy I had known about, because we'd taken it out together 7 years ago. 3 years ago, without my knowledge or Warren's apparent knowledge, the named secondary beneficiary had been quietly changed. It now listed Petra. I sat in Gil's office and looked at that page for a very long time. Then I called a litigator I know named Reeves. She does estate fraud. She's the best in the state. Reeves told me we had enough to open a civil proceeding, but she also said we needed Warren. He's a beneficiary, she explained. He has standing that you don't have independently. If he's willing to be a co-plaintiff, this becomes a very different case. And if he's not willing, she was quiet for a second. Then you have a different kind of problem. I had been carrying this for almost 2 months at that point. Every dinner. Every Sunday phone call Warren had with his mother while I listened from the other room. Every time Petra texted him something and he laughed at whatever it was and didn't show me the screen. I sat Warren down on a Wednesday night. I made dinner first, his favorite, which is a small detail but felt important to me, like I was trying to feed him something good before I handed him something hard. After dinner, I set the file on the table in front of him, 61 pages from Gil, the original 1987 trust. The insurance policy page with Petra's name where mine should have been. I need you to read this, I said. He looked at the file, then he looked at me. Meg, please, I said, just read it. He read for about 40 minutes. I did the dishes. I wiped down the counter. I sat back down. He was still reading. When he finished, he set the last page down very carefully, the way you set something down when you're afraid that if you're not careful, something will break. My mother did this, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. And Petra benefited significantly. Whether she directed any of it, I don't know yet. He was quiet for a long time. The insurance policy. Yes. She changed it without telling me. Yes. He put his face in his hands. I sat across the table from him and didn't say anything, because there wasn't anything to say that the 61 pages hadn't already said better than I could. After a while, he looked up. His eyes were red. Did she try to cut you out this weekend because she knew you'd find this? I think so. I think someone told her I was an estate attorney who actually reads documents. I paused. Or she's always known it, and she finally decided to do something about it. How long have you known? About 2 months. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I met his eyes, because I needed to know how much you knew. He flinched, just slightly. And then he nodded slowly, like he understood why I'd had to ask. Warren called his mother the next morning and told her he needed to meet. He didn't tell her why. She suggested Sunday brunch. He said no, today her house, 2 o'clock. Reeves advised against Warren going in without legal representation present, but she agreed to be available by phone. We'd decided Warren would go. I would not. My presence would make his mother defensive before he could get anything useful. I spent that afternoon at Gill's office, reviewing the final version of the civil complaint we were preparing to file. It listed my mother-in-law and Petra as defendants. It alleged breach of fiduciary duty, fraudulent transfer, and tortious interference with Warren's beneficiary rights and with my own rights as his spouse under the original 1987 document. Warren came home at 5:30. He sat down in the kitchen and didn't take his coat off. She cried, he said. She said she did it for the family. She said the business was struggling and she was protecting what her father built. What did you say? I said her father built it for all of us. He looked at the table. She said you'd put ideas in my head, that you'd been manipulating me since we got married, that this was exactly what she'd been afraid of. Warren, I know. He finally took his coat off. I know what happened at the end. I told her we were filing suit, and she told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. He looked up at me. Then she told me to leave. We filed the complaint on a Thursday morning in November. Reeves had put together a case that was, in her words, unusually well documented, thanks to Douglas and to Gill and to 61 pages of financial forensics. The defendants had 30 days to respond. My mother-in-law hired a litigator out of Phoenix named Alcott, who had a reputation for motion practice, for dragging things out, filing procedural challenges, making cases expensive enough that plaintiffs give up. He filed 4 motions in the first 3 weeks. Reeves responded to all of them. I helped her draft 2 of the responses, which was strange, sitting at my own kitchen table, writing legal arguments in a case that was also my life. In December, Alcott filed a motion arguing that I personally lacked standing as a plaintiff. He argued that because I was not a named trust beneficiary, any claims I had were derivative of Warren's and should be dropped from the suit. Reeves called me when she got the motion. He's not wrong that it's a plausible argument, she said. But the 1987 document has a specific spousal provision, and we have evidence they were aware of it when they moved to amend. The intentionality matters, meaning they knew they had to cut me out before we found out what we were being cut out of, I said. Exactly. That's not just breach of fiduciary duty, that's conspiracy to defraud. The judge denied Alcott's motion in February. 2 weeks later, Douglas was deposed. He was steady and precise and brought documentation for everything. 3 weeks after that, the financial advisor from Tucson, Kessler, received a letter from the Arizona State Bar and, facing his own professional exposure, hired a separate attorney and began cooperating with our side. Petra called me in March. I hadn't spoken to her since Sedona. She said, "You realize you're destroying this family." I said, "I didn't move $2.3 million out of a trust." She was quiet. Mom was protecting what Grandpa built. From who? From. She stopped. From me? I asked. From Warren? From the people Edmund actually named in his trust? I waited. Petra, your grandfather built that company. He set up that trust. He decided who it was for. Your mother decided she knew better than he did. I paused. And so did you. She hung up. I set my phone down on the counter and stood in my kitchen for a minute, looking out the window at the backyard, at the citrus tree we'd planted the year Warren and I moved in. It had finally started producing this year. Small, slightly lopsided lemons. Warren had made a whole thing about it, squeezed one into a glass of water and acted like it was a miracle. I thought about Edmund Harwick, who I'd never met, who had built a construction company from nothing in Arizona before I was born, who had trusted the law to carry his wishes forward after he was gone. I thought about the 44-page document he had signed in 1987 and how it had sat in a filing cabinet for decades, doing exactly what he'd asked it to do, until someone decided it was inconvenient. The case settled in June. My mother-in-law's attorney contacted Reeves 2 days before we were scheduled to begin discovery depositions. The settlement terms took 3 weeks to negotiate. She and Petra returned $2.1 million to the trust, structured as a 10-year repayment with interest, secured against the Scottsdale property and certain personal assets. The guest house Petra had been living in was sold, the proceeds going directly to the trust. The amended trust document was revoked, and the 1987 original was reinstated with one update, a new clause added by Warren, in consultation with me, that established clear governance requirements and annual independent audits going forward. The life insurance policy was corrected. My name went back where it had always been supposed to be. My mother-in-law did not speak to us directly during the settlement process. Everything went through Alcott and Reeves. She sent Warren one email in May, which he showed me. It said she hoped one day he would understand that she had only ever wanted to protect what the family had built. She did not mention me. Warren wrote back. It took him 4 drafts, which I watched him write and rewrite at the kitchen table over the course of one evening. The final version was 2 sentences. I will not share them here because they were his, not mine. But I watched him read what he'd written one last time and then press send, and something in his face looked like a door closing quietly in a room that had been open too long. Douglas came to our house for dinner in July. He brought a bottle of wine, which he apologized for being too nice. I told him it was exactly right. He sat at our kitchen table and talked about his 19 years with Harwick Construction, the projects he'd been proud of, the people he'd liked, the way Edmund Harwick used to walk through the office on Friday afternoons and know every person's name. He was the kind of man who believed in doing things correctly, Douglas said, not just legally. Correctly. I thought about that for a long time after he left. Warren washed the dishes and I dried them, which is our division of labor that we've had since our second apartment, and the radio was on low, and outside the kitchen window the citrus tree was dark against the evening sky. Are you okay? Warren asked. I think so, I said. Are you? He handed me a glass to dry. I keep thinking about my grandfather, he said. I never really knew him. He died when I was 12. But I always heard he was straight, that he was fair. He paused. I think he would have hated what happened. I think he would have, I said. I think he would have liked you, Warren said, which caught me off guard. I looked at him. He was looking at the dish he was rinsing. Because you read everything, you don't just sign things because someone tells you to. He handed me the next glass. I should have read it too. You didn't know what you were looking at, I said. Neither did I, he said, until you showed me. We finished the dishes, we turned off the kitchen light, and I stood for a moment in the doorway between the kitchen and the rest of the house, looking back at the window, at the small piece of backyard visible in the last of the evening light. I have spent my career reading documents that families fight over after someone is gone. I know how it goes. I know how money changes people, how grief becomes greed, how the language of love gets borrowed to do the work of theft. I have read 1,000 versions of this story. I never expected to live inside one. But here is what I know now, standing in the doorway of my own house, in the life I am still building. Edmund Harwick signed his name to 44 pages in 1987 because he wanted his wishes to outlast him. He trusted the law to hold what he couldn't hold himself. He was right to trust it. And I was right to read every single page.